Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Heaven's Vault, now with music. This is a historical linguistics and archaeology themed puzzle adventure. Seems to revolve around deciphering some hieroglyphs, as seen here in the title itself. I have already played through the tutorial once, so I vaguely know what happens. Let's get started.
Stories don't have tidy beginnings. The past is always present.
Sounds a bit like British English to me. I'd have to check.
There has to be a spark. Something that brings the past to light.
Where this was produced. Please climb carefully. It's not too much further. It's actually the way that I am myself. One last corner around climbing or hiking. Oh. Take a moment to rest before you walk, Mr. Please. You can use the mouse to move the camera. In some scenes this is more constricted than in others, and the WASD to move around. In breaked up opening, there is something here. To keep people out, do you think? Or to keep something in? There's something written here. Greetings in Hylos. Ancient script must have been cut in when the mortar was still wet. I think I can read it. I have to assume that the hieroglyphics here are indeed Heaven's Vault, although I have not played the game far enough to have a complete understanding of the puzzles. The University of Yorks, or Yorks. Some lines are voiced, some are not, so I have to guess how some names are pronounced. Some weeks earlier.
My story begins on Iox.
Iox.
That was where I met the robot.
The robot is of course someone that we already met in the prologue set in the future. This one. It says Alia Elasra. I've been waiting for you. I've been asked to escort you to Professor Miari. He is very anxious to meet you. By using the tab stop, we can jump to a timeline where the most of the events that we know of, actually at this moment we do not seem to know very much of the past at all. You have to go several years into the past to get any other points on the timeline. So we have some personal history of our main character, born 33 years ago. An orphan working for Timur, whoever that might be, actually. We can check this here. Who is Timur? The bartender. Perhaps not particularly impactful for the current adventure, but We shall know. And we have to pick from some dialogue options. Am I in trouble? I'm in trouble, aren't I? She did not say, but I imagine she is simply being welcoming. This way. Did she say what she wanted? Yes. She said she wanted you. So why has she sent you? Did you do something wrong? That seems unlikely. My ethical core prevents me from serious error. Ah, hello, Keres Anya. The robot looks like you. In the center is bald, I imagine. Do you have a name, robot? We have a time limit for these dialogues. Is that intended to be a joke, mistress? No. Robots do not have names. We are, as I understand it, interchangeable. You should know that the professor's urgency was remarkable. Look at her. Look at who? You understand, I will be required to report it. Ah, so I see that the robot is indeed spying on us. Required to? Of course. Professor Miyari is my primary user, mistress. Nonetheless, I will try to sugarcoat your opinion. Great. Good to know you've got my back. Shall we proceed? Ray of knowledge. So they call it. Each branch grows more branches. Hello, mighty germ. Greetings. I've played quite a bit of this game, and I'm still not sure what exactly to make of it. I've only played 15 minutes or so, so I can't tell you much yet. Until you finally reach the sun, whatever that is. I went outside the university grounds once, exploring. This is a very beautiful moon. You can tell it was once lush, fertile. There must have been huge forests, lakes, rivers. But they're all but dry now. You've not been outside? What kind of game is it? Reminds me of that dream-centric Eurojank. Forgot the name.
I was
Seems to
15
be.
when my Ari rescued me from the slums of Elbereth and brought me here. I'd never seen such luxury or such kindness.
So a small pause here outside. This is kind of a puzzle adventure, it seems. Once we get to Miyari's office, we have our first puzzle in which we get an item with an inscription on it and have two choices for both words as to what they might mean and a bit of input from our main character as to what kind of line of thinking we should take. Hello Luroxing and hello Robert Brown. Creepy ghost skeleton bot. So let's try to take a better look at him. What kind of... He can stand up, although he relatively rarely does. He has threads and some kind of a ghost face and hands. Hello Cliff. Wow, this game looks pretty interesting graphically.
I still don't know why she did it.
It does. This is a very interesting art direction. Professor Mayari? Alia, there you are. Come in. I came as soon as I got your message. You don't need to flatter me, Alia. Nonetheless, I'm glad you came. I know your work is important to you. Tell me what you need. Straight to business. Very good. You're our expert on history. Tell me what you make of this. And here we get an item that is certainly old. Empire period. The device is the eagle and sun. One of the scholars sent this brooch to me, Janiki Renba. Did you know him? Pete? Look at the detail. I see them, ancient markings. I know they're a hobby of yours, Alia. But can you read them? Here we have our first puzzle. And I've never seen either of these groupings before. The two words have some common elements, so they must have related meanings. Well, I'd say it's somewhat of a VN too, with how certain choices shape the story. That's interesting to know. Let's see what kind of a story we end up with in that case. This seems a bit jittery to me. I'm going to increase my computer's performance a little bit. Unfortunately, this also means that the fans will be louder, so you may begin to hear them over my voice. So here we can switch, pick between holy and friend for the first word, and beloved and emperor for the other one. I already know that the correct one was holy emperor, but we can review. We know that this is from a so-called imperial empire period, so something like something related to an emperor on an eagle wing brooch would be certainly expected. Eagles and emperors go well together. But some political entities have an ideology of equality, even when they are ruled by autocrats, such as the Roman emperors call themselves primus inter pares, the first among equals, for a while being actually hereditary monarchs of the major, perhaps the greatest power in their sphere of influence. So it might be entirely possible that a dear friend might as well, a beloved friend, could be something that a holy emperor would call themselves. Later, during the prologue, we find out that this was in fact the correct answer. The expression amrelato is another language-centric visual novel. I'll have to keep that in mind for when we are done with this. Check it out a bit. Holy Emperor? But I'm only guessing. What's this about? Janiki told me he'd found something over a month ago. Janiki isn't like you. He's an Ioxian through and through. You're worried about him. He's important to me, and I don't know what he was doing out there. He told me he was going to a moon called Mercy. I can't go hiding in the nebula for missing people, Alia, but you can. That's what you do, isn't it? Find things. I'll look, but no promises. That's fair, thank you. Come back soon, Alia. Perhaps one of the ways to affect... and Alia, you're taking a robot with you. Thank you, Professor. I long to see the nebula. Oh, and before you go, you should look in on Huang. He was eager to see you. Eager why? Alia, really? I couldn't possibly imagine. I know he's rather beneath you, but you could at least say good faith to him, for the benefit of our little community. I'll bear that in mind. You're as cold as the rivers themselves, well suited to the stars. He's down there by the grave. You must have walked straight past him on your way in. Good hunting, my dear. I'll ask a question. Would you recognize Renby if we saw him? Did you meet him? I believe he activated me, mistress, after I was uncovered. I suspect this is why Professor Nyari assigned me to you. And can I say, Mistress Alia, it's wonderful to be accompanying you. Oh yes? And why is that? I find humans fascinating, and you are very different to most here. Have only recently been activated. I'm calling you 6. 6, mistress? I don't remember that. I wonder if I got Miare's translation correct. I think I did. The shape shows this is an empire piece. Of course, correct. As I have already played through this. Oh, hello Caleb. It's a funky 2D and 3D art style. The gods believe themselves to be emperors believe themselves to be gods, so it makes sense that the words would be almost the same. Totally correct as well. Honestly, what is a remark? It still doesn't tell me where did this thing come from. Now here we have a pause. Mostly reminds me of kind of old pseudo 3D games like Duke Nukem 3D, for example. Spike AD, hello. It reminds you of Mario Kart 64 and those early 3D games that still use sprites. Quite interesting looking. Old 3D games are exactly what it reminded me of. Actually, when I was young, I tried making some mods, modifications for Duke Nukem 3D with a friend of mine. This project never actually got particularly far, so I don't actually have anything to show. But this number of similar drawings remind me of that. Let's ask a question. 6. You are buried? Did they find you on Iox? Indeed, mistress. They chipped me out of a wall. That's actually something that I would like to ask about, but we can't. What do you think of the sculpture? It has a pleasing balance to it. Worth the time it took to make it, do you think? When there are people on Elbereth who don't eat. Are your own exploits worth the time they take, mistress? You will not be making history rather than reviewing it. Alia, tell me, are you still wasting your time on curious notions of history? Yeah, seems like this game will take a look at some... too slow. You should devote yourself to real science, mechanics maybe, philosophy. History is a science. It's the exploration of the past, through evidence and theory, honestly. Most people like you will not be content until you have unearthed your own skull. Faith you, Alia. May the waters light your way. Here we see, apparently, if I dawdle do too long, then the other character will just say what they want, instead of the game defaulting to one of the possibilities. It seems that we do live in a society that does not particularly value information about the past. If we can reply, I really hate her. Understandable, mistress. 6. How long were you buried here? I have no idea, mistress. I do not remember it. And you don't know why you were buried? No, mistress. I can only assume I was not needed. Perhaps robots were not trusted. Perhaps, mistress, you have observed robots to be more predictable and more kind than most humans. That's certainly possible. They're not the first robot I've had trailing me, you know. Every time I break or lose one, they give me another. I can't figure out why. The university cares for your well-being, mistress. There's one. I think it's... maybe he knows something about Renba. Alia, I didn't know you were back on Iox. Professor Miyari wanted to see me. Nothing bad? Perhaps. I'm not sure. She wanted me to find someone I know. Yannick Renba. But I know Renba, of course. Well, a little. What did he teach? He's a roboticist. One of the best. One of the few. Why has she sent you to find him? I thought you dug things up. By the waters, Alia. What's happened to Janiki? I don't know, Wang. I'm sure it's nothing bad. Oh my. Before you go, it hardly seems important now, but I found a line of ancient in the Annals of Mazwai I thought you might like. If you have time, that is. Show me, and I'll let you know if I have time. Here, see what you think. Empress something and something. I know one of these words, I have to guess the other two. What do you think is the symbolism behind the translucent legs? From the question, I have to assume that this is a bit of a spoiler, that there in fact is a symbolism behind them. I had myself thought that this was perhaps more of a mechanical or aesthetic choice. I haven't thought of one yet. My idea was that it might be something to do with the relying on heavy keyframes instead of having full animation. Yeah, I think that buried, vanished. I assume the transparent legs were meant to symbolize the game running at a higher FPS. Exactly my idea. It would definitely save some dev time. Now, whether the devs had this idea as well, or whether it was my idea, I don't know. And since Luroxing has played this game already, he must have some information that we do not have access to. But of course, it is always possible to have both mechanical and thematic value to some artistic decisions. In fact, I think it might even be ideal. There's certainly a level of pictography involved with deciphering the language. Or actually, let's scroll back a little bit. Was it Luroxing or was it Shin Hylos? It was Shin Hylos who has played this game. So it is not necessarily a spoiler that Luroxing posed me this question. I have the vague idea that these words look similar to the one in the prologue. That was a vault. So buried might be the one we are looking for. And robots is the one that I would come to, having listened to Stix's little story about being buried for an unknown period of time. The best design choices are those you think were based on limitations but turn out to have plot importance. Yes, that would be an excellent design choice. Let's see if this turns out to be one. Speaking of pictography, it seems that there are several types of symbols here. Some of these are quite high, some of them are quite low. I could imagine that some of these, perhaps the smaller ones, for example, could be vowels or some other kind of sound, possibly found inferior or less important by the society speaking this language. This is the case for many abjads. For example, Hebrew and Arabic both have primary symbols for consonants and some vowels. For example, a word initial R has its own primary symbol in both of these languages. Although I have a vague recollection that might have something to do with these words also having a word initial glottal stop, so it would be an instead of a. But anyway, I imagine we'll get further on that line of thought later in the game. Ah, King Hylos is of course going to keep quiet about the plot details. Thank you. Empress buried robots. I think that's correct. I thought there weren't any robots in the Empire. This suggests otherwise. I'd best not keep you. I hope you find him. Shall we proceed to your ship now? Have you sailed before? Styx. I have no idea, mistress. But I am keen to find out. So we left the hallowed halls of the university. It seems that when we are standing, we have filled-in legs, and our robot has his filled-in breaths the entire time. So it might in fact be mostly mechanical. Although the after images might have some symbolism as well. Both the Nightingale. This ship is my refuge. It's the only place that's truly mine. The journey to Myracy should be quick, mistress. Nice place, is it? I do not believe so, mistress. I believe it is a farmyard. Why does a roboticist go to a farm? To study the competition, perhaps? Or perhaps there are robots buried on Myracy. Are there robots buried on Myracy? Most likely not. It is a moon of pigs and rice, mistress. Part of the Iox Protectorate, of course. Maybe Myracy will have a few ruins of its own. That seems unlikely, but it is not wealthy. Nonetheless, I will prepare the ropes. The robot seems to be making a bit of an error of chronology here. It's where Janiki told the professor. What is a seems that this recap flies by quite quickly, so maybe I shouldn't even try to read it aloud. Of course, which areas were important or powerful in the past are not necessarily those who are powerful or central in the present. Myracy might well have been some sort of a trading hub or military center during the Empire period.
Mayari wanted us to sail to Mayerzy. It was a short sail through fast waters.
Ah, we have an actual mechanic here. Take the next right up ahead, mistress. Oh. I see the force of the river is deposited in the middle, mistress. On the surface it appears the same, but there are deeper currents below. Left here. It's certainly an interesting art design for the spacecraft. You seem to have a bug-like central part and some wings. This is your ship, mistress? Oh. What do you think? She is very beautiful, mistress. But I cannot help wondering how you came by her. That's Myracy. You can see the greenery from here. Myrsi, a farming moon. Renbar's here, I need to find him. And if he's not, I need to work out where he went.
We stepped off the ship and into the mud. Mud covered the ground and rock. And everywhere I looked, things were growing from the mud. And some of those things had legs.
Look at this place. Breathe the air. I cannot breathe, mistress. As you are no doubt aware, well then, let's see where Renbar's got to. If we are really lucky, he might have found an old pot. And check our inscriptions. We do not have a lot of them. Let's see. Solvable. Unsolved. So it seems that the solvable ones are the ones that we actually can actually interpret. And the unsolved ones are the ones where we have a guess for it. Will be useful in the future, I'm sure. Oh. Let's ask someone. The robot seems to be afraid of running water. Perhaps he is a vampire of some sort. Something scratched here. The emblem of Iox. I suppose this is where the Myrsian leave goods for the Empire to collect. Can we enter the storehouse then? Well, Janicki won't be hiding in there. How do you know that exactly? Tithe barn was big. The moon produces a surplus, mistress. For what good it does them? Pardon me, time to block a bot. And maybe see if I can somehow add this on my blog, or add this to a blog list. It seems that the big follows ban forever. New bots on this planet, it seems. Indeed, it has been quite a while since we saw a bot. I think I had some bots on my first or second week. After that, it has been quite a while without any. I don't think I can quickly find a blacklist here. No, I don't think so. Let's hope that there aren't too many bots. And if there are, well, I'll just have to take the time to block them one by one. And at some point, I'll get around to building my blacklist. I know Streamlabs has a whitelist or blacklist option, but whether or not that affects the actual chat on Twitch, I'm not quite sure. So where do we start? There's a series of rice terraces. If we climb up away from the water, that should take us to the village. The listing statue. I love these old moons with their ancient stories. Who is that, for instance? One of the older goddesses. She is guarding the fields. Evidently, over 1,500 years have passed since she was carved. How exactly do you know that? It's a long time. Relative to what, exactly? There used to be guards throughout the nebula, even on Iox, before the Empire was founded. I'm surprised Iox let this one stay. Where does all the water here come from? And there's a wellspring in the rock below us, mistress. The soil is permanently saturated by it. Let's follow the pig. This one doesn't seem to be a particularly role-playing pig, so perhaps he is not P20. But big nonetheless. Oh,
The
two of
air
them
smelled
and a human.
earthy and sweet.
Nice. Do they grow anything else here? No, nothing happened. It would not appear so. Seems like everything is fine. What is a wellspring anyway? A source, mistress. Nothing more. But what is a wellspring? How does it work? Obviously it is a source, mistress. It has no mechanism as I understand it. Here the robot is wrong. Natural water sources do have mechanisms. Usually the mechanism is the geology and geometry of the area and hydraulic pressure, that is gravity. Many apparently natural sources of water actually accumulate in a mountain and then are pushed out through structures within the mountain. Actually, I am prepared for this. I have my slides here, and I am going to draw something for you. Let's find the chalk brush so that we have a consistent art style for these streams. I'm unfortunately not quite sure what these things are called in English, so I'll use translations. But hopefully there aren't any geology students here who definitely need to have the correct terminology for their examinations. So let's imagine that we have rock here at the bottom, and then we have some sediments. An area like this here is where earth water accumulates. I think this is called an aquifer in English. Usually, when you are digging wells, you actually want to dig into one of these. So you would have your well on the earth here, maybe have some houses, and you would bore your way deep enough that you get, ideally, to the bottom of the aquifer. Of course, with historical technology, this would be somewhat difficult. But in fact, the water content usually increases when you move downwards. So you have a quite small amount of mobile water in the topsoil, and then the amount of water keeps increasing until you get to a bowl in the rock like this, where it actually stays for a long time. Then, if we have a mountain, let's imagine that this is a mountainside, and we have a spring here that bursts with water. Of course, this water doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from inside the mountain somehow, and usually this is actually a case of a bowl like this, like in the previous slide, existing somewhere in the mountain, and rainwater will accumulate at this bowl through some cracks in the mountain. Perhaps it is a softer mountain, not quite quartz. Quartz is one of the hardest rocks that you find building mountains. Perhaps there are some chalk stone, for example. Chalk is perhaps not something you would first think of when someone says a mountain, but I myself have been to a chalky mountain on a day hike. They make quite interesting sinkholes. And such a sinkhole here on the mountain could be where the water makes its ingress, goes into the mountain, is pushed along by gravity, but slowed down by the geology. This might be some kind of a sediment. The water might be working its way through a soil of a sort. And at some point, it finally appears at the source, so a fountain of some sort. This is also the reason that there are some intermittent fountains. What are these called? I think I already used the word once today, but now I can't remember it. Quelle in German. I think springs, spring water. Intermittent springs. In the case of an intermittent spring, the thing is that you have some amount of water coming in, and you have a set amount of water that you can actually store in the soil here. And then it moves through, it springs out of the other side of the mountain, and at some point it just dries out, and there isn't any water anymore. This is a bit outside my field of expertise, so exactly what kinds of circumstances lead you to have intermittent springs and permanent springs, I can't really answer out of my head, but I think that was the important part. The robot was wrong. Let's not trust him. He is not infallible. So, back to the game. This moon seems most poor to me. There are no proper buildings. There's mud everywhere. You've grown soft on Iox. This is normal. Good, even. These people have everything they need. I've never left Iox before, mistress. To me, this place seems barbaric. They have plenty to eat. That's a good start. I did not intend to give offense, mistress. I'm sorry if I did. Geology time. I hope you've enjoyed this short geology detour. Good to know. I was getting spy vibes anyway. I think he even admitted to being a spy during the first couple of minutes. If I had intended to give offense, I would have called these people rats or something similar. Keep your voice down, maybe? I don't know why Miari wanted me to take you with me. The professor cares about your safety. I don't think we should question him quite yet. Then she certainly doesn't care about yours. He admitted to reporting something that we said to Miari right at the beginning. So, at least when we take certain dialogue options, we do know that he is some kind of spy. Can you do a scan for Janiki or something? Mistress has mistaken me for a dog. Perhaps you believe I have a scrap of clothing there that trace his scent. You're not much use then. I have visual scanners of exceptional equity, mistress. If I see him, I will let you know. Doesn't seem helpful to us. He dominates everything. Emboreth has a statue like that, sort of. It's just a pair of feet. Eox must approve, although I understood they destroyed similar statues on other moons. A pair of goddess feet. It sounds like something that a certain colleague might appreciate. Mistress, is something the matter? I'm detecting certain elevated emotional markers. Am I being short with you? I'm sorry, 6. If it troubles you, I'll try to be more polite. Let's try to chat at that pig. Or, let's start with the villager. Good faith to you. My apologies, Yoxian. My pigs need me. Please, if you could just be kind. His pigs need him. Let's try to chat at this pig. We have to use the stairs. It looks like a smug face. Let's check. Yes, that was a smug one. Unfortunately, we cannot interact with this pig who seems to be facing between this ramp and the lowland. But, this seems to be a Southeast Asian pig, if I know my pigs, which of course I don't. Please do not count on me for accurate pig information, but I have seen some pigs in my life. My aunt actually bought a so-called mini pig once when I was a child. This was sold to her as a pig that would stay small, perhaps the size of a cat or so. But Master Renba could be in any one of these buildings, mistress. You intend to search them all? The warehouse. Oh, there's someone crying. So why can I hear crying? As a pet, yes. The idea was to have a small, fun pig. But either this pig was not actually any kind of a mini pig, and she was scammed. Her husband, who was a car thief, brought it from abroad, so it might well be that it was just a scam. But it might also be that it was biologically some kind of a mini pig, but that not all of them stay small. It indeed grew to be about 100 kilos in weight, so the size of quite a normal pig, a large animal even. So they had to keep him in an outhouse. Was it a joke? I don't think so. It seems that the robot will be a bit of an annoyance. I will wait out here, mistress. That's probably a good idea. You! Do I know you? You're from Iox, aren't you? I'm from Iox. I heard your voice, your accent. He told me you might come. Janiki? My tall Ioxian. He left something for you. With the goddess to keep it safe. What did he leave? He said it would show you the way, Miare. With faith to you. And I hope you find him. Thank you. I have to go now. I don't want them to see me talking to you. Ah. Who exactly are them? Taniki left something with the goddess, did he? Why would he do a thing like that? Seems like 6 here, it might not be our only antagonist. We can't see anything out of the window. Brain in the marsh somewhere. Oh, a bug. But, oh no, I was just, I had misplaced my fingers. Most curious, mistress. You heard? But I did not understand, except that it would seem someone from Iox has visited here recently. You think there is something more to be learned here, mistress? Perhaps we should return to the ship? The woman said Janiki left something here. To the goddess. I want to find it. And let's take a look at the goddess first. She was somewhere here, I think. It seems that these ominous strangers might be a problem for us. Are the moons on the nebula all like this, mistress? Some of the nebula is like this, but not most. It seems pitiful to me. You should see what poverty looks like. I'll take you to Elboreth soon enough. Oh yes, the ramp again. Where was the goddess? Was she down there? Oh no, she is up here. My aunt actually had a number of animals at her house, a rural farmhouse. some horses, the pigs. I don't remember if there were any normal animals, dogs or cats or something like that. Where is she from? Well, the material, I would judge it was not quite here, but most likely close by. It's very big, you understand. You can't be sure. No. It has been here for long enough for its various radiation features to have faded. Ah, so he is using some sort of a uranium series or the like to date this item. That is quite interesting, in fact. Let's have another digression to the slides. So, when it comes to the usual dating methods, let's make it black. Dating methods. Of course, the first one is bridal capture. This is the one where you get your mates together and mount your horses and ride to the next village, where you will find a young lady that you are interested in, or perhaps have even planned this in advance, and take her with you to your village. This might or might not be consensual. I would say most often is not, but there are known instances where it was. And joking aside, we are not talking about that kind of dating. We are talking about where we have radiocarbon. Then we have luminescence. And then we have the fission series. The radiocarbon theory, radiocarbon dating actually works only for a couple of tens of thousands of years. So once you get past, the Mesolithic, it doesn't work anymore. Because the way this works is that you have some carbon in your living organism, and you have different isotopes of carbon within this system. Carbon mostly comes from food. I think some of it comes from outside as well. And some of these carbon isotopes are radioactive. Radioactive, that means not nuclearly stable. So they will break up into different elements with a deterministic period. This is where you get half-life from. A half-life is the time that it takes for you to get down to half of the amount that you had before. So in one half-life you have 1/2. In 2 half-lives you have 1/4. In 3 half-lives you have 1/8. So this ends up falling exponentially or developing logarithmically. So you have the most activity loss at the beginning, and at the end here you end up in a situation where, first off, if you are unlucky, all of the radiocarbon might have decayed, in which case you only have stable carbon in your organism. And in this case, of course, well, at best you have a terminus ante quem. So an estimate of how young it can be at most. Not extremely helpful in all cases. And when you get closer to this, the statistical anomalies start cropping up more, because the more nuclei you have, the more predictable their breakup is, because every single nucleus has its own, let's say, ticker, you can think of this as like a computer game mechanic. So for every unit of time, you have a random chance of it breaking apart. And of course, when you have more of these items, you have they average out. So some of them break up faster, some of them break up slower, and you end up with them as a group breaking up at the average rate. But when you have, instead of having, say, 5 million items, you have 100 items, then this uncertainty comes to play. And at that point, it gets unreliable before it gets completely useless. Then we have luminescence. There are two types of luminescence that are useful for dating. One of them is thermally activated. The other one is optically activated. How exactly these occur, I'm not quite sure. But somehow the crystals of the material become tense. I don't know exactly what happens. But this can happen when you heat something or when you expose something to radiation. The optical here in the radiation variant is because usually we are talking about the spectrum of visible light. So you can find out when an item has been exposed to light for the last time. It somehow gets primed. And when you release the priming, you can somehow measure how long it has been. I don't know how, but if you if you come to this stream expecting entirely accurate information about using the natural sciences to date artifacts and geological items, I'm sorry to disappoint you. And the thermally activated luminescence is, well, caused by heating. You can find out when the item was heated for the last time. This is particularly useful for pots and the like, when you can find out when it was in use, as hopefully the last time that it was in a fire was when someone was cooking with it, or something to that effect. The luminescence in the name comes from that they actually do luminesce. They shoot out some sort of radiation when the priming is released, although, as I said, the mechanism eludes me. And the fission series, which I imagine is what the robot here is talking about, although in that case that statue would have to be amazingly old. The fission series are similar to the radiocarbon, but instead of carbon you use thorium, for example, or uranium. If there are other commonly used fission series, I can't remember them. So the point here is the same. Thorium and uranium are unstable. They will break apart with a predictable rate. And when you start at uranium, it breaks up into something and something else. And at least one of these is also unstable. So you end up going through a tree like this, counting up how much uranium you have, how much something else, how much something else, how much something else, until I think iron is the last stable result of the uranium series. And assuming the robot is talking about a fission series, in that case there would be absolutely no unstable elements left in this item. Whether or not that is the case, of course, always with games, you have to ask yourself, did the game makers think this far ahead? They must have made some research but how much did they? Perhaps we'll find in the future. The thing is that the fission series takes incredibly long to run to its conclusion. We can actually use this to date things that are hundreds of millions, if not billions of years old. This is actually how you date dinosaur bones. Are there common objects that don't have radioactive isotopes in them? Probably not. As we are talking about, if we are talking about trace amounts, I would say not. If we are talking about, appreciable amounts, then yeah, probably. I mean, probably the most radioactive item you can find around you is a banana. Bananas actually are relatively radioactive. That is why there is a joking unit of radioactivity called a banana equivalent unit. And jokingly, you sometimes see, for example, the doses of radiation you get from traveling in an airplane or getting an X-ray or living next to a nuclear power plant being given in BEUs. Banana equivalent unit. The joke is, of course, that most of these things are exceedingly safe. So, comparing them to eating bananas is saying that they are in fact quite safe. And that's I think that's an okay face. No, that's a Peko. Oh, all right, then it's an okay face. I imagine that Shin Hylos was not aware of this fact. Oh yeah, what I wanted to talk about in the uranium series is that you can actually see the uranium series having taken place in some archaeological glass items. As the nuclei break apart, they release a huge amount of energy, practically in the form of mechanical energy for the items being broken off. And these elements travel through the glass, and so you end up having, for example, you might have a whiskey glass. And if we were to zoom in on that whiskey glass, that's too thin. You would see these kinds of streaks running through the glass material, and that is caused by the uranium series. You can even see them with the plain eye if you have a particularly clear glass item. I seem to possess some esoteric knowledge indeed. That is the case. Some of you might know, but I have in fact changed my major while at university. I started out as a physics major, which is partially where this kind of information comes in. I have in fact studied a number of things. Some of them for fun, some of them to gain access to, stipends, grants. For example, I failed to find a summer job one summer and spent the summer learning about the history of, let's say, history of science. I'm not quite sure what the translation would be, or what this branch of history is called in English. It's not quite called of science in my language, but close enough. That was extremely interesting. For example, I have some bits and pieces of information about the medical beliefs of the Middle Ages, about some political ideologies of the early modern period, panopticons, the origins of the observation state, let's say, where the origins of trying to tie subjects to their state by making them believe that they have a stake in the state, where they go from being subjects to being citizens, although largely in their mind, the amount of power that citizens actually have was by design quite low back in those days. And of course, in many cases, even formally restricted to landowners. So, going from the nobility, the hereditary landowners having all the power, to a plutocracy where non-hereditary landowners have all the power, well, that's not as much of a leap as these period politicians might want you to believe. But let's get back to the game for a moment. We can take another break if we have to. So either the robot is wrong, the developers were not quite up to date on their dating methods, or this statue is in fact hundreds of millions of years old, which I find unlikely, as it still has quite some sharp features to it. I would imagine that this statue would be far more weathered if it were actually old. Here's Renba's mysterious secret, almost buried in the grass. A shard of crystal. Does it mean anything to you, Six? It is most curious. This moon does not contain any crystals of this type. What type of crystal is it, Six? Iolite, mistress. And this is something that we have here on Earth. Valueless. Nearest brooch. The stone inside, it is same as Renba's crystal? Undoubtedly. Obviously they came from the same source. Well, not quite obviously, but assumably. We can find that source? With some analysis, mistress, yes, I believe we can. Time to depart, mistress? No, I don't think so. We still have more to do here. Now that we have found our item, let's go snooping around. What kind of a researcher were we if we did not try to find out something more about the area we find ourselves in? Let's look at the map. The map is a space map. Iolite Moon, that's likely the place where we want to go next. So this single area cannot be particularly complicated. Let's see if we can find some other person to talk to and find out who exactly might be watching us. Is there anyone here worth talking to? Can we leave? Let's try the village first. Something in the grass here. Is it something in the mud? It is. A stone figurine decorated with the eagle and the sun. I think it dates from the Holy Empire. It must have been dropped here years ago. It's only been revealed by the irrigation of the fields. There's no inscription to tell me who it's supposed to be. I'd hazard that this comes from the same site as the brooch, the one Yari gave us on Iox. I think this should help us find the place. What did you make of the figurine, Six? The most curious item, mistress. It does not appear locally made, and despite your translation, it does not appear to be from Iox either. So where's it from? I am unsure, mistress. Different moons have different radiation signatures. I do not recognize this one at all. You're hardly well traveled, Six. That is true, mistress. I have been to Iox. This figurine has not. Has the figurine been here for some time? It seems quite apparent it has, yes. I'm not familiar with rice fields, but on the kinds of fields that you find in Europe, wheat, rape, other oil plants, it is in fact the turning of the soil that releases artifacts. How much higher? One level, mistress. So if you traipse around some fields after they have been plowed, you can in fact find some archaeological artifacts, mostly broken pottery, maybe some flint items. I have been to one field survey, I think they are called in English, where we found some. There were remains from some sort of a high temperature process, but if it was glass making, metal processing, something like that, I'm not quite sure. And combining the other more technical information, it was actually quite interesting. This heated, or let's say this oven that we discovered had stood at the bank of the river. This was visible in the geophysical survey of the site. And it was also connected with some kind of a ditch. Perhaps this was some kind of a process that was dangerous to the village nearby, and they wanted to have immediate access to water to put out any fires. Who knows? I certainly don't, but it can be quite interesting. Unfortunately, I was only around for one day in that survey, so exactly what kind of threat... Ah, a person. Good faith, lady. Please keep it quick. I don't want to talk to you. He's an unfriendly individual. I'm looking for someone. An Ioxian man called Jan Henba. Are you expecting to find him hiding behind a tree? You don't like Ioxians here, do you? That's no secret. Return to your moon. Leave us in peace. Well, I don't think she's going to be much help. Let's see if we can find someone more helpful. Not necessarily. Why do they build on stilts, do you think? Well, it doesn't flood up here. The mud, perhaps, mistress. Or perhaps animals sleep underneath. Here it seems that this robot is not very knowledgeable once again. Unfortunately, we have to have another digression about reasons you might build on stilts. This is not a topic that I am particularly knowledgeable about, but it is something where I have several points of information. The system that I am most familiar with is one where you have... actually, let's use green for the soil here. That's going to be fun. You have the soil here, and that is wet. And on top of the soil, you will probably have your house. And what you do is you build... you have beams, sort of like railroad tracks, lying on the ground itself. In some cases, these are stones. For example, in Japan, they are usually stones. But I think building on stones is relatively uncommon in Europe. I have seen some buildings like these on stone supports in an outdoors museum in Sweden, so it is not unheard of. But let's go with standing on wood. And then you have your actual structure suspended on top of these rails here, whether they are standing on rocks or wood. And in this way, the corroding processes of the soil can only work on the supports themselves. In the case that the supports are on stones, this should make the house practically immune to wood rot. Another effect is that the house is somewhat suspended in the air, so you end up having a breeze under the house. This is not fun if you want the house to remain warm, but it is fun if you want the house to remain dry. So this is a trade-off. I think in Japan you actually often have these kinds of a hole at the bottom of a historical building, so that you have your hearth. So here you have some stones and your fire, your cook pot, that kind of things. And I assume I am no expert on Japanese architecture. I did want to be an architect when I was young, so I have some information about architecture in general, but not particularly Japanese architecture. But I think this is the way it works. So you have these beams here, again, at the corners. And you end up having a kind of window, a reverse skylight, if you will. But here you have the house itself. And you could sit here at the bottom while you are cooking, for example. Let's throw a dude here sitting. It's a very thick dude. I am not particularly good at speed throwing. And he's going to have that top knot. I don't think a samurai would actually live. Oh, actually, I don't know if a nobleman would live in a house like this. I'm not quite sure if you know, prestige architecture had this feature as well. I know that it was a part of vernacular architecture. I'm not quite sure. You have a bonus or a malus of the wind being able to blow in through here. So what you end up with is a house that is actually quite cold in the winter. But this is usually the case for every kind of historical building. When you look at historical European buildings, for example, if you go to the Stone Age, you have just permanently open windows acting as the escape for the smoke. Actually, speaking of the smoke, that rises as well. I'm not quite sure if Japanese buildings had a skylight to let the smoke out. I know that European Stone Age buildings did, and this is also a reason why these buildings were quite cold in the winter. I have been to an open-air museum about this kind of a village, and some of my associates have spent the night there in the winter. I did it during the summer, and it was nice. I mean, it wasn't cold, so it wasn't a problem. But as I recall, they were able to keep the inside temperature above freezing when it was something like minus 20 degrees outside. So that's a definite improvement, but you wouldn't want to be naked inside or even halfway dressed inside. That's just not fun. The way that more modern European buildings would fight the problem of the cold is with thermal mass. So you would have your building like this, and Inside the building you would have a very large stone oven. And you would heat this thing up for hours. You would have a roaring fire inside this mass of stone, and it would get hot. And as stone has a high thermal mass, it would stay hot for a long time. So you'd heat it up, maybe you'd cook at the same time, and then you just let it heat your house up during the rest of the day and or evening. Another way to build houses are pit houses. You have the soil here, and then you dig into the ground. I know that in some cases these have been fitted with wooden beams as well, but I don't know if that's universal. I know that pit houses have been used in by the Slavs in the Middle Ages. So if, for example, you went to Poland and wanted to imagine a building built in the 600s, 700s, this would be a pit house. And then you would have probably some amount of walls above ground. I don't know about this. And then your roof. Tangentially related, an article about heating people, not spaces. Sounds incredibly related, yes. Actually keeping the room warm enough that you can comfortably exist in it wearing underwear is a very modern thing. Historically, you would be wearing clothes almost all of the time. But I think that's enough digression for now. Let's get again back to the game. I should actually count up how much time we spent playing the game and how much having some digressions. But judging by the amount of digressions, this is a very good game for me to play. I imagine if most of you are here for information, this might be interesting information as well. There's a person there. Another lady, I think. This galaxy seems to have no, this is a bald man. Stranger. Greetings. Greetings to you. Welcome to Mercy. You have come to trade? Actually, I'm looking for someone. Who? For the Mercy and Surly. We are alike as ants to you. That's not true. So you are looking for a Martian. I know my friend Janiki was here. I met one of your villagers. She knew him. She? What was her name, this villager? It doesn't matter who she was. Where is Renba? And why are you hiding him? If we had seen your friend, if he had met with an accident among us, what would Iox do? I just want to know where he is. We have not seen him. Now leave. I don't understand why you're lying to me. The man sighed. Your friend was here. He left in a ship. Then something exploded in the sky. I do not know if that was your friend. Good faith to you, lady. Good luck with your search. They say the nebula is wide. What? What a perverse smile on Six's face. Ominous. Indeed, says Shinhylus. I am glad that you found this these topics interesting as well. Must be at the top now. There should be a communal point somewhere here. I hope that the digressions will continue to be interesting in the run of this game. Janiki expected Miura to come here. Has the professor even left Iox? It would seem likely. The professor is from Renaki, after all. Miura came to Elboreth once. She rescued me from the orphanage there, although I still don't know why she did that. I've never understood Professor Miari. You know, she brought me from Ajax to an orphanage from Elboreth. Now she keeps giving me robots when I keep losing them. I really don't know what she gets out of it. Perhaps she likes to be kind, mistress. This seems unlikely, given that she has a robot spying on us. Seems that we cannot enter this building. Miari, kind? Have you met her? She's strong, she's principled, she's organized, she's fair, and she's as kind as a thunderstorm. I think that was the lady that did not want to speak with us. So there don't appear to be anyone else than her and the bald man. There's not many people tending all these crops. Plants are not like pigs. They do not require constant husbandry. What do you know about pigs? I meet people. They are also livestock. How ominous. I think the pig is incorrect once again. I am again no expert on pig husbandry, but I do know that in some cultures in Southeast Asia, domestic pigs are in fact half domestic. They are let out to pasture and they come home for the night. Let's move automatically towards the fields. And eventually, when their time to be slaughtered comes, they are just taken and killed and eaten. So they are somewhat between a house animal, is a farm animal, a pet, and a semi-wild animal. Of course, many more classically herded animals like cows, the what else do we have? Well, reindeer, caribou. Ah, hello, Bunzel. You've been right about everything pig-related so far from what I've seen. Are you yourself an expert on pigs? I have an authoritative voice, and of course, I believe that everything I tell you about pigs is correct. Whether or not it actually is, it's another matter. Can I run? It doesn't seem to be the case. Well, I'd have to think of something to talk about for the ship 6. We've done all we can here for now. For the scenes where we are walking off or sailing. And so we left the warm, wet fields of Mercy. Infer a lost site exists. Don't know how to find it yet. Somewhere in the cyclones. What exactly are the cyclones? Let's take a look at the unknown site has also been marked on our map. So the unknown site is another spacefaring site. It's quite an interesting take on archaeology, having us research cultures that were themselves spacefaring, if they were able to bring these iolite artifacts to Mercy. I know a lot about pigs and farming, but my knowledge of breeds mostly is limited to North American practices. Well, no wonder, of course. I actually don't know much about pigs and farming, um, other than what I've read in ethnological literature. Of course, other than the pigs supposedly mini that my aunt had. About Nightingale, Renba left a crystal for Miare to find, but what was he trying to tell her? We could otherwise sail to Iox and tell Miare what we've learned so far about Renba. Well, we won't. We are going to investigate ourselves. I'm quite certain in my analysis, mistress. The crystal we found and the element inside the brooch, they originated from a moon somewhere in the edge of the cyclones. The cyclones is dangerous wild. There's nothing there but clouds and storms. I am aware of that, mistress. I wonder, what exactly did Renba discover? We'd better find out. Blow the sail, 6. Ah, we have a definite situation, a definite site for the Iolite moon. We can plot a course there, and I think if we want to look for the unknown site, we will have to do it by hand. I don't know enough to find that site yet, so perhaps we can either find it by hand, or perhaps we will find more information on the Iolite moon. Let's go. One fun fact you might already know is the Spanish would unleash pigs on random islands and then come back years later to settle the islands. I have heard of something like this, yes. I think this works more or less works with sheep as well. I know that some islands are being protected, kept in the state that they want, that people want to hold them in, by keeping sheep there that subsist on the grass while being more or less feral. The verdant pass, sailing to the Iolite moon. On the topic of pigs, I have heard an urban legend, I say, a number of times, that even domestic pigs are extremely dangerous when they are hungry. Do you think? Do you know, or do you have any intuition about whether or not that could be the case? I know that wild pigs, I don't know if they have a specific name in English, let's say wild boars, they can be extremely brutal with almost anything they find, including humans. Interestingly enough, it seems that boars were actually a high prestige animal to hunt in the past. There are a number of elaborate carvings on European royal items depicting boar hunts. And in some countries, there are even noble houses with boars on their in their coat of arms. There are actually enough comments that I will have to scroll back at some point. Actually, yeah, we can just take a pause here. With sheep, that's very odd. I could see goats, but sheep tend to die, get stuck in branches and die. That sounds surprising to me, as sheep seem to have been quite capable of surviving as wild animals. Perhaps this is a question of the specific species of sheep. Perhaps the kind of fluffy domestic sheep are unsuited for this, but perhaps some more primitive sheep are in fact suited. Perhaps I'll actually be hardworking enough to look into this. Pigs can kill, and they are very willing to. Oh, hello, Pig D20. You are here. at least now. Domestic pigs and wild pigs are the same species. I'd have to look into that. Of course, the definition of a species is contentious in itself. I know that domestic pigs can regain many warlike characteristics when they go feral. Domestic pigs are very dangerous even when they aren't hungry. They're very comparable to bears. That's good to know. I never really interacted with the pigs of my own that much. And apparently that's a good thing that as a child I did not try to play with them as if they were dogs or something. When it comes to domestic pig, I imagine that there's quite a variety of domestic pig varieties in itself. Well, not really my area of expertise, but this does remind me of a topic about primitive farm animals. I'm not quite sure if the common way to refer to these is primitive or archaic in English. I know that in the case of languages, it's dependent on the language. So, for example, archaic Irish is also sometimes called primitive Irish. But I personally find that more than a little bit demeaning. So I imagine that it is uncommon today, and especially uncommon within Ireland itself. Pigs can be very sweet, but they are still huge animals that aren't raised to be hypersocial like dogs. Yes, huge animal, I think, is probably the operative phrase here. I have seen footage of, for example, large cats being quite sweet and friendly animals. But the thing is that they are incredibly powerful. So if they get angry at you, they're going to make short work of you. This is even the case for house cats. I have a friend who was relatively grievously injured, enough to necessitate staying at the hospital for, or being treated at the hospital after her house cat got angry about something and scratched her head quite badly. I think archaic is more correct, but primitive is a better, more descriptive word for animal breeds. Probably the case. What primitive breeds are, in my opinion, are closer to wild animals. So in that case, primitive might fit. Natural might be another one, but when you say natural, you start getting into all kinds of, hippie ideologies. So let's keep on calling them primitive. I don't think any pigs or sheep will get angry at us for not being politically correct to them. I think when it comes to pets, humans also don't really fight back as strongly as they could, which leads to them getting more injured. Yeah, this is probably the case. In any case, when talking about pets, we of course interact with them much more than we do with wild animals. Imagine a house cat and a manul, a wild cat from Siberia that is close in size to a house cat. Even people who live in Siberia are very unlikely to actually come face to face with manuls. Whereas a house cat, a pet cat, you will take in your arms, you will hug it, you will sniff it, you will kiss it. And if you annoy it while you are holding it to your face, it has a much greater opportunity to injure you than it does if it's 10 meters away and it doesn't particularly like you. Big D20 has given me the P-Pass. Thank you for this very useful P-Pass. So, primitive How what are house animals, domestic animals, called in English? Do they even have a useful name like that when we are talking about pigs and the kind of thing? House cats can go completely wild in 2 generations and reverse. I wouldn't be surprised. I know that house cats are biologically almost indistinguishable from the Middle Eastern wildcat that they descend from. They certainly haven't had the kind of intensive domestication effort like dogs have. And we see that in the fact that very few cats are actually the kinds of horrifying incest golems that most dogs are. Unfortunately, I am quite conservative when it comes to biology. I dislike the fact that pugs, for example, exist. I would prefer it if all animals were healthy. But unfortunately, they are not. You have to get into Persian cats and things like that to find malformed skeletons in cats. Fortunately for me, as a cat lover, I've seen some, 3D tomography images of Persian cat skulls, and they are grotesque. I would prefer it if Siberian cats did not exist either. They look like they have skull cancer. One of the eclectic courses that I took at university was actually paleopathology. I did not remember much from that course. It was about identifying diseases in skeletons. But I do remember the skull cancer. It was probably not very fun for the person who had it. And I don't think having that kind of a skull is fun for the cats either. It's domestic pigs. Some taxonomists put them in a separate subspecies, but generally they are classed the same as boars. So I'm going to keep saying domestic for farm animals. It's good enough. Well, after waffling about it this much, everyone in the audience is going to understand what I mean in any case. We have done great injustice to our supposed best friends. That is the case, and fortunately or unfortunately, most of that has happened very recently. There are actually some paintings of primitive pugs from the 1800s, where they are clearly still viable animals. It has been maybe the last 100 or 150 years that we have systematically abused dogs into being these kinds of horrifying creatures that they are today. And I hope that the kind of animal fancy culture changes. It seems that a change is beginning, but I hope that it penetrates the entire purebred animal society quickly, and those kinds of animals cease to exist quickly. There was a study that collected DNA from many wild dogs in Africa to get an idea about historic dog breeds. That would be very interesting. I have myself attended a presentation about primitive dogs myself, and the presenter gave out some examples of modern dog breeds that are biologically quite similar to primitive dogs. Some of them were uninteresting. They were, herding dogs from the middle of nowhere. But one of them was one of those palace dogs from China. I can't remember which one, but it was a tiny lap dog. But other than the size, surprisingly closely related to an actual wolf. There was a very interesting domestication project for Russian fur industry foxes you might be interested in. The same hormones that make foxes and dogs more tame scrub their fur colors, making them useless for the fur trade. How unfortunate. I have actually had superficial contact with this project. I haven't actually read any of their publications, but I have seen some video clips and TV programs about them. I think if you live in America or the United States of, it is actually in some areas legal to import one of those foxes as a pet animal. I think they needed something like 40 generations or like that to arrive at a pet animal. And the other way was interesting as well, where you go from normal fox into pet fox and into asshole foxes. I remember the asshole foxes being quite dark in their color, and the pet foxes having floppy ears like many dogs do. And I wonder if the asshole foxes also developed some sort of unusual fur color as compared to wild foxes. That would be interesting. I actually wanted to talk about something. Finally, yes, I remember. It was about primitive farm animals. Specifically, sheep. Sheep today are almost exclusively white, as we know, and they are quite fluffy. But when the original sheep, this is the most scientific graph that I have ever seen. Thank you, Roxing. Going to the original sheep, wild sheep were actually quite dark. This is a topic that I have read an actual paper on. Unfortunately, I can't remember all of it, but I'll tell you what I remember. And in addition to being fluffy, primitive sheep had two kinds of hairs. So they had this fluffy, warm hair that modern sheep do as well. But they also had some quite strong, robust weather-keeping hair. This is similar to birds. Birds also have different feathers. They have these stronger feathers that actually keep them aloft and keep them dry, and they have down the feathers that keep them warm, and that we of course make down jackets and pillows out of. Also fluffy. Which makes me wonder if there is a down-only bird that might have been selectively bred somehow. Might look interesting. Lapis Lazuli. Wow, cool. Is this Heaven's Vault? This is a digression into primitive farm animals, somehow prompted by the game Heaven's Vault. Mighty Germ never knew about this. I think the black sheep became an insult through the black sheep of the family. So in the time period when you would mostly have white sheep, you would occasionally have black sheep. So a black sheep of the family is someone who doesn't fit in with the others. And I think that's the origin of the phrase. Hello, some dumbass nerd. Heaven's Graph Simulator. We are debunking the spy robot fact. That must be the case. Usually when I start on a digression, it's something that the spy robot said. That's not true. This must have been something about farm animals. So anyway, getting back to my sheep graph here. You start out with almost black sheep, and then at the beginning of when they start diverging from each other, you have black, I think you have gray, and you have brown sheep. So all of them quite, dark, drab colors. And you eventually, relatively late, get into pure white sheep. So generally, if you want to find a sheep that has this double fur and is dark, you are better off looking at some flocks of primitive sheep. I know that some exist in Northern Europe. If you want, you can buy primitive sheep wool from Iceland, at least. And I think some of the continental Scandinavian countries have them as well. I have a vague idea that there are some primitive sheep in Finland, for example. Probably in Sweden and Norway as well. Alright, I think I probably had something that I wanted to say about sheep. Oh yeah, now I remember. There's a funny anecdote about old archaeologists from more than 100 years ago, so let's say Belle Epoque archaeologists, who found some wool textiles and interpreted the textile they found as a mixed fabric made with both wool and dog hair, and thought that the dog hair was there as a strengthening agent, the same way that we put plastic into our wool these days. But that was actually not the case. Both kinds of hairs were from a sheep. The thing is that at that period in time, they were still using primitive sheep. This also means that the material qualities of wool textiles in the, let's say, Merovingian, Viking era and before that were extremely different from what wool textiles are like today. So, for example, in the Viking era, Scandinavians made their sails out of wool, which is something that is unfathomable, I think, for modern people. Think about woolen socks or something, and imagine a sail made out of that same cloth. It doesn't work that way. But in the past, it did. Akin to old growth wood. Partially, I mean, old growth wood is stronger than young wood, but the mechanism here is different. In the case of wool, it's a question of the animal itself having changed and lost the stronger parts of the wool. Whereas I think in the case of old growth wool, it's entirely possible. Old growth wood, it would be entirely possible to let a modern tree live long enough that it became the kind of strong, massive wood that some of the ancient oak groves, for example, were more like a material lost. Mostly lost, yes. It would be actually very interesting to find, to have a comparison of the material qualities of primitive sheep wool and modern mixed wool. I wonder if the mixed wool and plastics are materially superior to the old primitive sheep. I could see that being the case, but romantically, I of course would like it if the good old sheep was stronger. The woolen sails I hadn't heard before, but I assumed they were a dense felt. That's actually a detail that I am not familiar with. Whether they were the kind of what is this technology called in English? The one that you use a loom to produce, so you end up with this kind of I would imagine that it was this kind of structure and then felted. All right, just weaving. I think it would probably have been a woven textile, and then primitive sheep wool apparently felts naturally, so they might not have had to actually do any work on it. Just make it, step on it enough to get it done, and hoist it up on the mast, and it might have been ready with that. Unfortunately, I can't remember any actual details about this. So then back to Heaven's Gate. If someone more newly arrived was actually interested in the game more than hearing me flap my gums. We are traveling through space looking for a moon from which a stone, the material for stone artifact came. Mistress? Exactly how many robots have you lost? Well, 6. I mean, sounds like an easy question to answer. Can't you guess? 6? I am appalled. Ah! I missed a turn. Fortunately, I can just cheat. We want to take a left. Ah! Excuse me, yes. I did forget to change my screen. I actually haven't... I am not capturing my second screen. I am capturing the game and Greta separately. So, I apologize, I forgot that. When I switch to Heaven's Vault, it doesn't actually switch you to Heaven's Vault, but fortunately for me, it also means that it is much more difficult for me to commit any sort of yabs, for example, with my browser history or things like that. They just keep giving me more. It's surprisingly difficult. I wonder if I can actually... my findings suggest the Iolite moon should be in this vicinity. I wonder if I can actually crash into something. I probably will, before sooner or later. Ah, nice. We have a map on our navigation screen. There's a rock up ahead. What have we found? Above the crystal moon. Why would anyone come to a lonely spot like this? I'm wondering how they process the wool for those sails now. Wool is naturally oily, but leaving that in instead of washing it out would allow water-resistant sails. They probably left it oily. I know that sailors' clothing made out of primitive wool was left oily. And I actually have an associate who claims to have a primitive wool sweater, I think. A shirt, in any case. And she doesn't ever wash it. She just brushes it if it gets dirty and airs it. And this is actually reminds me of an interesting thing about primitive leather clothing, you know, from before modern chemical technology. Apparently, when you go far back to the Stone Age or so, you would have to regularly smoke your leather clothes to keep them supple so they wouldn't get hard and crack. So, as a result of that, people wearing leather clothes would smell like, well, smoke all the time. We have arrived, mistress. The moon below us is rich in purple iolite crystals. But there is no surface flow. We cannot land the ship. Renba must have gone down somehow. Indeed. Most likely he used a hopper. We might do the same. Hopper? The Nightingale is fitted with a hopper, of course, for instantaneous travel. How does it work? There is a source. The source fires a subject and casts it into the hopper's eye. The eye refracts the signal. It is focused and reconstituted. Sounds like a teleporter to me. But an unusual teleporter in the sense that it does not copy you. The surface is within the line of sight of Nightingale's eye. It does not copy you, but rather moves you. Ah, you will have to go down alone. No air? So what was Renba doing here? I hope I will discover that. Please wait here. Just don't take too long. And he just starts teleporting. How rude.
A moment later, the robot was gone. And I was alone in the dark.
If I flew away now, I could be rid of that thing. A useful thought. What were you up to, Renba? We didn't find robots on Mercy. What did you find? Ah, he's back. Mistress. He's bringing something along, I see. I found something, Mistress. A tool chest? Is this Janiki's? Probability is high. I believe the moon below us was once a quarry, but this box is no artifact. Renba hid his box down here. It was a superb hiding place, Mistress. But whether it was Renba's doing or not, I could not say. Well, let's take a look. We'd better not have damaged it. It appears intact to me, Mistress. I hope there isn't a snake in there. Purple something. Why would Renba hide something like this? He must have had a reason, Mistress. His choice of hiding place was extreme. Janiki, what is this? Some kind of robe? It's hundreds of years old. And there's something stitched along the belt. Tiny characters picked out in a darker thread. Ah. Purple robe has some text in it. This is a long one. Let me think. The symbols look somewhat related to my translation for robots. Ah, here we can compare. This certainly has some elements in common with Emperor and with Holy. Let's take a look at the last one. That's almost identical with Holy. Let's say Pray. This has to be something sacred and something with humans, I think. But whether they could be citizens or pilgrims. Let's start with pilgrims. Out of these, I think we or I might be the most likely one. Luckily we have these related words which appear to be preset, so I can't go bungle my way on this myself. Let's see, let's compare buried with the other ones. Buried. I chose this translation for a reason. Let's see if I can remember what it was. Buried, banished. Pray. Buried and banished are so close to each other that robots are related to the unknown word somehow, it appears. Robots, rebels, laborers. I wish she didn't take these pauses. I want to jump from the mechanic to another directly. We pilgrims pray seems to make sense. Were you a pilgrim, Renba? Some ancient faith, perhaps, kept secret from the powers back in Iox. Did you leave that shard by the goddess not as a clue, but as an offering? Secret from Yari herself. This is there's more in there. Tablet made of silver, beautifully preserved. On the edge, there seem to be some inscribed glyphs, Mistress. I think we've seen the question mark somewhere. This isn't the word I already know. I have to make a guess. Hmm. We do have this question mark in Prey. This might be something related to speech. Market? No? I think no. I think is the one that I'd go with to begin with. I could see Huang things when I get back to Iox. I don't think this is one of the same place or period as the Robe. In fact, I don't think we've seen anything equivalent to this tablet before. So it must have originated on a site that's undocumented. But that's not all. There's also a book bound in leather. How did Renba get his hands on all this? The binding is in fantastic condition. The book must have been part of some ancient courtier's personal library. The inside cover seems to be inscribed, mistress. Ah, we are getting quite a bunch of new words. This seems something holy. Let's say book. Second work doesn't look like anything I've seen before. Holy, pray, knowledge. Let's say knowledge. What could this be? Old, future, all. I don't think we have. We share a symbol with pilgrims and no here. It might be every or old. I'm gonna put in every just for fun, and then book of. Perhaps this means to be a dictionary or an encyclopedia. Book of every knowledge. It comes from the same side as the tablet, I think. So are these leads? Or are these things that Renba was after? Wait, mistress. I will consider the matter. Can you work out where the rope originated? I fear so. It is not a good location, mistress. But Professor Miari was keen that we found Master Renba. And I am sure Master Renba is equally keen to be found. Show me where he went, 6. I'm not exactly certain, mistress. I believe Renba traveled far from home, into the eye of the cyclones. That does sound dangerous. What and where are the cyclones? I think, that is exactly where our mystery site might be. So, time to go there. This is probably not going to be that dangerous, honestly. This is an adventure game. Unless this is a Sierra one, I don't think we can die. But, let's see if we do. It's not impossible. Cyclones. Sailing to the eye of the cyclones. I think we'll get to the cyclones, see what's happening there. Does the rope's origin suggest there's a cult living inside the cyclones? Doing what? Worshipping the storm? It's possible. Humans have very strange hobbies. Hold on, 6. We cannot hold on. Where do we actually want to go? Up? Yep, we are still on the track. We are in one piece. We appear to be. Right? I started on saying something but I lost my thought. Well, if it's valuable, I'll think of it again. Renba must have really wanted to hide what he hid in that box of his. I wonder why. Ah, the rabbits. Oh, area is wild. Wait, wait. I am working to keep as central as possible. I don't know what will actually happen if I fall to the side. Where do we want to go? Up. All the way across, it seems. Now we are near to the eye of the cyclones, Mr. S. I cannot see which way to turn at this branch, Mr. S. It will take a left and then a right. We have to choose one and explore. Oh. How horrible exploration in this puzzle game. Here we go, and we have been this way before, Mr. S. I don't think we have. Last time we turned here. Yeah, I think that they're just confused. I see it. There's something up ahead. The moon? There is air, but no upriver, mistress. You will need to leave the ship here and hop her down. Please do not be alarmed. It is quite safe. The eye of the cyclones. Will the Renba be waiting for us here, in the center of the storm? Of course, when it comes to teleportation, I would advise against any sort of teleporter that copies you, rates your composition, and replicates another you at the other location. That is a copy. You die, and you gain a copy. That is not actually teleportation. But it appears that this one actually breaks down your body, moves it around. And therefore, I would say that the resulting person is in fact the original.
For a moment, I was gone. Not aboard the Nightingale, not on the moon beneath. It could have been a heartbeat or an hour. But I didn't feel the cold until I reappeared.
Definitely seems to be British. It seems Janiki had a taste for places like this. You said the last one would be empty too. And it wasn't. So who knows what we'll find here. Perhaps a box of hand towels and a hairbrush? This weighs 6. Perhaps Renba is waiting for us just around the corner. We can hopper him back to the Nightingale. This chapter of my life will be done. Perhaps, mistress. We can only hope. Hold it. 6. What's that?
Here, in the middle of the hurricane, there was a house. It was fine. Tucked in below the overhanging rock. Wooden beams, mud brick walls, shutters. Large enough for 2 families to argue over. It would have been measly on Iox and grand on Elbereth. But here, it was impossible.
Buildings do not occur naturally, mistress. I don't think that this house is fine. It seems to be quite damaged, actually. Speaking of mudbreak, interestingly enough, there is a certain level of rainfall where mudbreak no longer works. The Middle East had a lot of mudbrick buildings in it during ancient times. For example, even the massive sacral architectures of the ziggurats in Mesopotamia were built out of mudbrick. And there was a time that perhaps immigrants from the Middle East, perhaps early farmers, or perhaps locals under the influence of Middle Easterners tried to build mudbrick houses in Greece. But it turns out that Greece is too wet for mudbrick architecture. The ruins of these buildings ended up collapsing. So The excavated ruins have clearly been washed away and collapsed. I won't touch anything. You cannot expect me to believe that, mistress. You are forever touching things. It's a bit unfortunate that these people insist on having these conversations when I am trying to have a conversation with you, dear viewers. Maybe I'll have to pause the game when I'm going on a ramble. This whole place must be slowly peeling away from the cliff. Perhaps you might forego going inside? No. So what should I do? Just go back to Iox and say we got so far and then we gave up? You don't think she'd send us right back here? I don't think Professor Miyari wants you to sprain your ankle, mistress. I know you don't have feet, Six, but honestly, they're not as delicate as you seem to think. Some kind of structure. How do we make our way over there? We could vault over the wall here. Please do. Please, mistress. The floor beyond could only give way beneath you. Who cares? The floor seems sound enough. Six? Where did the robot go? That's a very good question. I imagine we'll have to find him. Six? So robots abandoned me for once. Look at this place, Alia. No one should live here. They couldn't. I have to agree. What would they eat? What would they drink?
The ghosts were still here, cooking, reading, doing whatever ghosts do. The house was empty, but it hadn't been abandoned.
He found his way in here. Mistress. Evidently it is good to see you intact, mistress. How did you get down that arch? I could not climb over the wall, so I drove myself off the cliff edge. Once I had dug myself out of the sand, I found a door. Now you understand why I keep losing robots. They're always doing stupid stuff like that. This place is empty. No ancient cults here. Ah. A crumpled blanket. Someone curled up here by the fire. It's warm. Someone died here, mistress. You're sure? The evidence is minor but significant. The person lay on the floor here for some time after death. Renma? No. Whoever died here scores of years ago. Lack of moisture on this moon have preserved traces, but they are old. So where are the bones? The person who lay in state here was only removed recently. Are you saying Janiki took them? What remained of them? Someone did. That's horrid. Why would he do that? I'm unsure, mistress. Something must have led him to this place. There must have been something here that he needed. Oh, an inscription. Symbols in the ancient script. Might be able to translate them. Some familiar symbols on the earth. Holy knowledge. This could conceivably be flow or goddess, I think. It's closer to holy than knowledge. I think knowledge would be more likely to flow. Let's start with the knowledge. This is almost entirely unknown. Let's say sky goddess. blesses harvest. Seems like something that blesses fire. Let's say fire. That is a fireplace. It seems better. Time or sky or death for the goddess. We'll keep with sky. That might be fine. This is a fireplace after all. I imagine at some point we will have enough of these that we will have to start cross-referencing them seriously instead of just thinking about them a little bit as I have been doing until now. There's an item here. Fire poker. I hope it has another inscription. It's worth anything. Unlikely. It's old iron, no more. Not my most interesting find. Still, taking it might come in handy. Speaking as someone who played a number of LucasArts adventure games, they were always useful. This looks interesting, beautifully made, much nicer than anything else here. I estimate it to be hollow, mistress. There's something inscribed on the lid. Might be a clue as to what's inside. Again, entirely new words. We share a single symbol with our potential knowledge. What could know be? Treasures, forms? Follows? I think follow is we? Perhaps it is we? Great. Let's say forms of great truth. Knowledge and sky seem to point to truth. And in any case, I imagine we'll have time to cross-reference this when we have more input. Truth? Talk about what? Let's ask if you can open it. It's a reliquary. Those puts your belongings when you die. The idea is you get them back when you return. Do people often return from death, mistress? The loop says everyone returns from the death, as long as their soul gets back to the rivers. And what do you believe, mistress? Nobody knows the real history of the nebula. Everyone who dies comes back. Why don't they know? Perhaps you require more evidence. I could have turned the camera again. It gets confusing for reading the dialogue when our heroine here blocks the robot. We open the box, mistress. Go ahead, 10-6. Not locked, mistress, but stiff. And I lack fingers for leverage. Alright, let's try for ourselves. Let's see if I can shift it. There's this. I've got fingers, but I can't get them under the lid. Oh, let's try the iron poker. Might be able to snap the lock. No. Ah. I'm going to try again. I don't think that was quite the result I wanted out of this. Definitely shifting. Here goes then. It is open. Let's see what was inside.
And there it was, just lying there. The greatest treasure I ever found.
6. Look at this.
And inside the coffer, from the distant past of the nebula's once great empire,
Incredible.
it was a crown.
If this was a horror movie, you should definitely not put it on. So let's do it. If you like mistress. Evidently it is a hat, after all. So I imagine it might suit Professor Miare better. The eagle and sun motif. Just like Janiki's brooch. Mark of the Empire. Could this be the crown of Eox itself? What's this crown doing here? This definitely wasn't the seat of power in the Empire. Did someone steal it? Hide it here, but never collect? That seems most unlikely, mistress. There's something written along the rim. Ah. Quite a long text. Ways, rivers. On rivers of light, we sail forever. I have not actually used any cross-referencing to arrive at this. This just seems thematically appropriate. I'm going to think about it more, perhaps next time. On the rivers of light, we sail forever. Is this crown what Miari wanted us to find? Is it why she sent us here looking? Renba too, perhaps? Mistress. I will have to tell her, mistress. The motives hardly matter. I guess. Well, let's keep looking. Ah, an axis. This is a bizarre combination of sort of an Iron Age technology level combined with space travel. How exactly this is supposed to work, I cannot quite fathom. A workbench. Whoever lived here would have needed to be self-sufficient. Then they would have needed water, mistress. The house has been built right up against the rock face. Must have been cold here. Whoever lived in this place would have kept their fire burning constantly. I wonder what they did for wood. That's a good question. Although I think water would be the more pressing question.
After the dead air of the house, it was good to see the sky again.
I'm not sure if I went through the house completely. I collected one interesting artifact, the crown, and so Huang will want to catalog it for you. First, we take the crown to Professor Miare directly. I must also inform her of our theories about Renba. Not just yet. As I was saying, there must be more to this place. I want to know who lived here, and who died here, and what happened to Renba. You know, I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier. But there can't have been many trays here to use. The wood must have been brought in. They probably had radically different ideologies concerning technology. That seems like the case, and if my guess about the Empress burying the robots, there might have been a Luddite uprising. An item. Something up here. A blade. A dagger. It will corroded, but beautifully crafted, and with an eagle and a sun on the hilt. Has been inscribed with tiny characters. I can barely make the letters out, they're so small. Is it a single word? Most likely not. Ancient scribes didn't always trouble to put in their spaces. I don't think they expected their writing to be read. This is not quite. Here we have fire. I think we need more elements to actually interpret this one. No, we can't move further away. Empress's fire. That will do for now. This is actually there are a couple of reasons that ancient texts do not have spaces in them. One is, of course, that the scribes might not have expected to ever, for anyone else to ever read them. Another is that for the longest time, texts were expected to be read aloud when read at all. And in fact, reading was in the Roman period, reading was something that was for slaves, as reading out something that another person wrote was seen to turn you into an extension, a servant of that person. So it would be even ideologically undesirable for the elites to do their own reading. I wonder if this door is jammed, or if it might open. It did open. The painting looked like a map to me, honestly. Swirls and flows. These are rivers. The detail. Who lived here? Who drew this? This looked like the rivers of Ghost's Wake, but no one goes to Ghost's Wake. An inscription? It seems so. More symbols. And this one is a phrase run together. I don't think we can quite build this one up. Impossible. This is definitely a map. But not of this place. Somewhere else. We came from upstairs, but I think I just run through upstairs. I will wait for you down here, mistress. I cannot climb stairs. Very good. I have nothing against that. These two doors lead outside. This leads to a collapsed room with a bed in it. There's an inscription here. It's old, barely visible, scratched into the plaster. I've not encountered any of these words anywhere else. I can still make some guesses. Emperor, we. This could be I. It would fit with the pattern of pronouns and an emperor. Knowledge, emperor, perhaps guarding. Buried emperor, no. Stranger. It's a beautiful example of the script. Pity I barely understand it. The angle is interesting too. Scratched by someone lying down. That is interesting. Although with a low bed like this, you have difficulties scratching anything while standing, and some trouble doing it while sitting. Locked. Or blocked. Or both. Let's see if we can... Yeah, so, yeah, yeah, that's the... the room with the window. It was collapsed in there, and we can see that the roof has collapsed into that room as well. I don't think we will be able to enter, but let's see what's up here. We can try. What was it for? What's this? Quite different than the rest of the building. Some kind of telescope. Position and bearings are fixed. It seems to have been for looking at that thing, whatever it is. The material on this thing is totally wrong. Metal? Rubber? Looks like something Roy might have built. I must remember to ask her about it. And there are scratches on the top here. Something fitted inside the frame and was removed by force. Did you take something, Janiki? But if so, what was this stand meant to hold? Is it smoke? That is definitely smoke. Oh, Renba. It's your ship, isn't it? Ah. Seems like something we might want to take a look at. See if we can enter this room. Ah. Let's get the glint first. There's something wedged here. A fragment from an anklet of crystal dating from the Yoxian Empire. The surface has been inscribed too. It's impossibly small. This one is a fractured piece from a longer phrase. Form, possibly. Other than that, I don't think we have any radicals for this. This one is close to this possible light here, but other than that, no idea. I think this originates from the moon, a bit in the wall mural. It makes its location easier to find. I don't think I can ingress here. Unfortunate. Scared of heights, I see. Just don't look down. I guess I have a mild fear of heights. I would say perhaps fear of dangerous heights. I enjoy roller coasters and climbing some relatively oh, let's not jump in there. Don't hassle me. Don't hassle the Hof. Relatively sharp mountains. If any of you are familiar with southern France, there are these extremely sharp mountains made of some kind of a metamorphic rock. In case you don't know, let's actually have a small digression into rock types. So you have sediment, rocks, you have magmatic ones. Or let's put magmatic on the right here. And you have I just used the English word, now I can't remember it anymore. Metamorphic. So sedimental rocks are of course made when sediments layer themselves. So you have, for example, sandstones. I think chalk is one of these as well. These are basically pressed sediment. So you have a process, for example, at the bottom of the ocean, where there is enough pressure to merge sand or another sediment together, and you get a sediment stone out of that. Then you have magmatic stones. This is where the rock has been hot enough to actually become molten and flow. And when it recrystallizes, you get magmatic stones. These are often like granite, for example, granite, however you pronounce this in English, for example, has this extremely easily identifiable crystal lattice at its surface. The single reflective crystals are actually quartz. And if you smack a granite rocks together, you can actually cause a piezoelectric spark. When you smash two quartz crystals against one another, the pressure building up here actually produces an electric charge, and you have what is practically a small lightning bolt breaking up the overcoming the dielectricity of the air and forming an electric current across the air from one crystal to the other. This is also the mechanism by which quartz watches operate. I'm not quite up to date on how exactly they work, but the piezoelectric phenomenon is somehow involved. And when you do this, you get a puff of ozone, the same way that you might when you are in a laboratory, school laboratory, watching Jacob's Ladder shoot up. I'm sure you have seen this, for example, in old sci-fi movies or games. For example, I remember this from seeing this in the old Commander Keen games. You have this lightning arc that starts at the bottom, where the separation is the smallest, and it climbs up the so-called ladder. You might also have heard about the movie called Jacob's Ladder, which apparently was the inspiration for Silent Hill. However, I have only seen stills and short GIFs from this movie. I don't know what it's actually like. And you might also get this smell in some sort of a metal workshop, as I think some welding processes also produce ozone. It's not healthy for you, so you shouldn't be inhaling too much of it, but it is fun to have in the upper atmosphere because it stops some of cosmic radiation. And then metamorphic rocks are, to get back to the geology, either of the others that has metamorphosed. So basically, the rock has become molten enough to be ductile, but has not become liquid. So, for example, you can get sediment stones that get twisted into ribbons like this, and then you have erosion cutting up some of it. So you basically end up with these almost knife-edge mountains. You can see a lot of very beautiful cross-sections of metamorphic mountains when you take the scenic train from Nice, Nizza, Niceville, towards Andrevaux. I think this was written like this in French, and I think just Entrevaux in Occitan. And Nice is called Niceville in French, and Nizza in Italian. Nizza Savoiarda, if you want to be exact. This is the Nice in Savoy. There's also a Nizza somewhere else in Italy, current Italy. Nissa. Nice was called, or is called, Nissa in Occitan. Getting back to our scheduled linguistics information. I don't actually remember where that scenic train ends up. I left at Entrevaux, which is a medieval village city along the river that runs through Nice let's say Nissa. I am showing my allegiance by using the Occitan names. And the river flow, there are two rivers that have their deltas in Nissa. One of them, I think, is the Rhône. I don't know what that is in Occitan. And that goes towards Switzerland. And the other one is the one that I can't remember, which goes towards the north-northeast. And Enteravao is along that route. And is an extremely well-preserved medieval town, let's say, which has a castle above it, perched on exactly this kind of knife-top mountain. And that's the... I climbed there. There's a road, so to say. You don't have to actually climb like a goat or climb a ladder. But it's very steep. I found it exhilarating. So, that was our digression into fear of heights. Let us return to Heaven's Vault, and let me remember to switch the input this time. There's an inscription again. I think there's a goddess here. This one is several words. Emperor. And the rest of it we cannot identify. Possibly forever. What could this be? Here we can guess. Guarded Sky Stranger. And the problem is that all of these are guesses. We are building hypotheses atop hypotheses. Depending on what kind of a society this empire had, it could be feared, live, or sleep forever. I would go with live. It seems the most normal to me. No, emperors live forever doesn't make sense. I interpret this as long live the emperor. Emperors here? What were emperors doing here? According to legend, the last emperor disappeared after Ajax fell. He didn't die here with everyone else. What's this thing? He came here? Stone pedestal. With someone in it. She seems familiar. Seems like the goddess we saw at that farming place. And it is. You can recognize her by her hat. The shrine is made of stone. But it's not the same stone as the moon itself. Is it as old as the building? The outer structure is certainly. But a stone pillar? No. The buildings here are significantly older than the pillar. Presumably it's made from local stone, though. I don't believe it is, mistress. The personal composition is quite wrong. But moving it to this moon must have been difficult. An important ritual object? Evidently it is significantly more valuable than the goddess we found within. Can you tell where it's from? Not immediately, mistress. Is there a phonetic component to this system? I don't know yet, at least. I have the impression that this might be an abjad. That is, that the larger symbols might be consonants and special vowels, and the smaller symbols might be vowels. Obviously, the building is at least 700 years old. How do you figure that out? I have been observing the rate of weathering on the stones, mistress. Extrapolating, this building is older than the founding of the Holy Empire on Ajax. It's interesting. They say nothing is older than the Empire. But the Empire and the fall are all that has ever been. If Ajax does not believe in history, what is it they think you do? That's a good question. And Ajax believes in the loop. They believe what has happened will happen again. I think I'm out discovering the future. This also explains why they devalue history, even from an ideological standpoint. linguistics, what do you know about the loop temple? I know little of the loop, mistress. The loop priests claim that life is a great cycle. They believe that all that happens has happened before. Literally happens. Do they think we've had this conversation before? I believe that is the idea, mistress. Is it true? The probability of it is incalculable, mistress. There is no meaningful data. Perhaps the same could be said of all religions. Have at you. This should tell us something about this place. There's an inscription on it. The precision required for this. Another fragment. At the end of a longer line of text. I don't think we can fit in anything other than possibly goddess here. Nothing. And getting back to the topic of a phonetic component, an abjad would be thematically appropriate for the setting as well, with the Middle Eastern names and appearances of the characters. An abjad would fit in well with that. Is this channel natural? I don't think it is. There must be a wellspring here. A feeble one. One that requires every drop to be used. Water would have run down this channel. Right past the house. Imagine having a stream of your own. Not a bad way to live. You can withstand the soul-crushing loneliness. Someone lived out here. They irrigated the land, prayed. Here, the eye of the cyclones. Some kind of hermit. An inscription on the rock. Another fragment. This one is a broken fragment on an even longer phrase. Not quite river, but not far apart. Something that would flow, I think. We have possibly us here. I don't think we can... oh no. Maybe we can fit the sky. Seems legit. Now we know that us is in fact a correct translation. Let's take a look at sky. Water fits this area. Water separates us, joins us, heals us. Smoke must be Renba. He thought he'd blown himself up. Or crashed. The smoke is this way. By all the moons and waters. Is this a wooden ship? It's a ship. I mean, it was a ship. Can we be sure this was Janiki's ship? No, mistress. The circumstantial evidence is very strong. Did someone blast from the sky? Really, mistress? It seems speculative, to say the least. What could do that? Eagles are supposed to breathe fire, aren't they? No. There are no eagles, mistress, as you well know. It seems quite apparent. It exploded on attempting to rise from the surface, mistress. The mangling pieces rained down at a high velocity, ricocheted, and buried themselves into the dirt. In short, I'm surprised there's anything left. Janiki? Most likely not. Renba didn't hop her down. He landed in his boat. Tried to. Or else he wasn't able to return. There are traces of an explosive propellant, mistress. I suspect Master Renba attempted to detonate himself off the surface of the moon. I wonder why Renba didn't use a hopper to get down here. Finding his ship must have been almost impossible. He was a devout believer in the Great Loop, perhaps. The Loopists believe that hoppering is like throwing oneself into a river, intended for the dead. It removes part of the soul. Renba lost more than part of his soul down here. Indeed, mistress. Blackened. Presumably the ship was still burning as it fell. And this was the hull. It must have been an explosion, mistress. It'd have to be seen on Mercy. You fool, Renba. So what do we do now? Return to Ajax and inform Professor Miari, mistress. I suppose I also assumed you would find Renba. I assumed, I don't know. Miari made it sound like he was running away. Perhaps you can take the matter up with Renba in his next life, mistress. Poor Miari. He's going to be heartbroken. Is there a way down? There might be more clues down there. I do not believe it would be wise, mistress. Indeed, I believe it would be quite the opposite. The fire here must have burnt up a lot of the air. The remaining atmosphere is thin, mistress. Still, I believe the fire was extinguished before it consumed the whole ship. This is just reflective, not sparkly. It must have burned for days. And Janiki? Mistress, there is no hope. Janiki must have been sailing when it fell. He cannot possibly have survived. Well, perhaps we can find his remains. What I can't figure out is this. What was Renba doing finding ancient sites? He must have been following some kind of trail, mistress, but how the trail began and where it was leading him. Most unclear. Oh, he's unhappy. What are you hiding, Renba? Good question, mistress. But we cannot hear you. Especially as a roboticist. An archaeologist, certainly, you would expect to be running around finding ancient sites. But a roboticist, perhaps not. Can I actually get there? This channel comes up from the rock. The Wellspring must be down there somewhere. The spring is dead now, mistress. You are breathing the last air this moon has to offer. Janiki is not here, mistress. Neither is anyone else. Are you ready to go home? Go now, mistress? Soon. Not yet. We are going to investigate everything here. And to make sure that there aren't any more glowies. There is a glowy. Something wedged under here. Seems to have survived the fire. Please don't be an arm. It's not an arm. A big coin engraved with a head. It looked like something from at least the earliest days of the Empire. It had been aboard Janiki's ship, one of his finds. I don't recognize the face. No Emperor I know. And there's an inscription. It hurts my eyes to try and read it. This one is a broken fragment from a longer phrase. Looks like truth, but I don't think we have enough for any of the others. This one could be an off, but I was in fact correct. This isn't truth, it's something else. So what could it be? Opposite of it? Deception, everything, worth? Rivers and water seem quite valuable in this culture. Let's say great worth. Seems like something you might write on a coin. This comes from the same source as the book and the tablet we found the site of Renba's cache. People must have commonly frequented the two places. New site indicated. Somewhere in Eagle's Pass. Was that everything? Do you think, Janik, you found the Crown 6? I don't think that coffer has been open in at least 500 years, mistress. He must have known it was here. Why he's come? Perhaps Janiki took something else with him. If so, that other item is lost. Is it really lost? I have a feeling that there might be something hiding in this wreckage. I'm going to take another look at it. Let's just play for time. There was a tripod up on the roof, empty now. It looks like it might have held something once. I would guess the telescope. Telescope or transmitter. Has to be one of them. Telescope. Must have been some kind of outpost observatory. I can't imagine what they wanted to observe. I can't either. I'm sure we will find out in due course. Can the Drax handle this kind of terrain 6? Excellently. Whoever designed my Drax appears to have had this kind of ground in mind. I get tired of walking, maybe you can carry me. If you get tired, I will hopper you back to the ship. Actually, I'd like to hopper right about now. Nothing we can do here, 6. Nothing at all. We have found one more intriguing artifact here, the coin. I also found some evidence from one more new location, an unknown moon. Are you ready to go yet, mistress? I think we're done here. Let's get out. I imagine we can come back if we need to, but I think I did a good job scouring this place.
Darkness.
This is not the Nightingale. 6. I hate robots. I hate them. They always do this kind of thing. Right before they give you the speech about how it was for your own good. Mistress, you are about to step on a small ant. My ethical core required me to lock you inside this packing crate. It's cold in here. There you are. Where's your head? Miari. What about Miari? You followed me, Lexi. I don't think I'm Lexi. As I thought you might. Because you knew. Because you've always known. Oh, Lexi is Miari's name. It is a recording of some sort. Of course I came. You laid a trail for me, so here I am. Renba. You are quite alone, Miari. I have seen the truth of your lie. You are not what you claim. I know this, Miari. You asked me to look, and I found so much. So who am I? You are just what you appear to be, and nothing more. Renba? You're a robot? I'm sure someone would have told me that. There isn't time. I found something. Something that matters more than me. Lexi, there's a great darkness. An all-consuming, hungry darkness. It is coming. Renba, your ship? It exploded. I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're dead. There's an ancient place, Miari. Observatory. is watching and it holds the wires of our fate in its claws. Tell me what you know. I will find it before the vault is lost. The robots know, but they don't remember. Someone long ago made certain they would not remember. Renba, just one question. What do the robots know? Everything. Renba doesn't seem to mind. Yeah, that seems to be the case, and it seems that Renba has actually infiltrated 6 somehow. It's nothing, 6. Let's not tell our spy robot about this development. I don't think he needs to know. I find humans most curious, mistress. You leak your internal state like a punctured bucket. Remind me to ask you how robots think sometime. We do not think, mistress. We merely calculate. It is far simpler. Try the hopper again. Mistress, the hopper will not function from here. There is no line of sight to the ship. This way, mistress. Actually, you don't remember how we ended up here. Hoppers can misfire due to imperfections, mistress. The eye about your ship is quite old. And no one called you just now. Evidently not, mistress. Strange. There's light this way. Didn't find anything in this cave, but here we are. Behind the let's do it. I don't think we have anything to go through here. Let's leave the moon. And so we left the surface of the ruined Hermitage moon near Myrcy, with enough new evidence to find a new site. This seems like a natural stopping off point. Aboard the Nightingale. We should sail to Iox and tell Miari what we've seen, and I'm sure she wants to see the crown. But we will not press any key to continue, unless it counts escape, which it seems to do. I'm going to keep hitting it. Here we are, at the end of Heaven's Vault. We've been going on for 3 hours. I think this is thematically and mechanically a good place to stop. Let's see about some raid targets. There are actually quite a lot of people online at the moment. Once again, I have to decide whether or not I want to go to the channel that I actually want to watch, or a different one to lead you all astray. Speaking of, time to stop the recording. Thanks to everyone watching.